No, sorry, that does sound stupid.
Shut up and listen to the songs.
Hello and welcome back to Shut Up and Listen to the Songs with me, Ben Wilson, your everyday guide to music, records, vinyl, just good music basically. This series of mine is still starting out, it's still finding its feet, and in this first collection of episodes, what I've been looking to do is to give a starter's guide to the world of vinyl. So that's basically my explanation of why I love vinyl so much, why I think it's the best way to listen to and enjoy music, how to get yourself a vinyl system, how to start up, where to go. But this is what I really want to do. I really want to be talking about the records because it's the records that I love. I mean, you could be a baker and you need to discuss ovens because you need that to bake with, but nobody gets into baking because they love ovens. And so, in a way, this is what I really, really want to be talking about. And so, in this edition, what I've got here is 10 records that if I was to speak to somebody looking to start a record collection, and I would recommend these records, not necessarily because I think they're the greatest records of all time or because I particularly want to look really cool. I mean, I do think they're genuinely great records, but what I'm hoping to allude to in this episode is why these records are great and why in particular they sound great on vinyl, and to give you the listener a different insight into what you may be getting by having that record on vinyl. Because the great thing about starting a record collection is that it can go absolutely anywhere. Your possibilities are literally endless, and that it's so rewarding in time to watch a collection start off just from a few records on a shelf to filling up that shelf to many shelves, and you can see your musical journey through the different records you've bought and when you've bought them, and also where you've bought them, who you were with at the time, what adventures you were on. It's such a rich, deep experience that kind of enhances the music, and it goes with you forever. So, without further ado, the first record I've got here is Court and Spark by Joni Mitchell. I can't believe it took me so long to get into this record. As an artist, when you grow up, you hear the songs like Big Yellow Taxi, and the first album of hers I owned was Blue, which is obviously an incredible record. But it was only recently that I got into Court and Spark, which she released in 1974, and it's seen her move on from her hippie folky days into a more easy rock jazz phase. The times have changed a lot from when she broke out in the 60s, and she's now living in Laurel Canyon, and whereas she would have been hanging out with hippies in the 60s, she's now hanging out with film stars, and all of the associated things around that have changed. So Joni Mitchell, it's really great that she's getting her flowers now because she is one of the greatest songwriters of all time, and you get all of that wonderful emotional intelligence and all of that depth and resonance. For me, I think we're living in a brilliant age of female singer-songwriters, artists. You look at the charts and you see all of the big selling people like Billie Eilish or Chapel Rowan, Taylor Swift, Olivia Rodrigo. There's loads out there. And alternatively, you've got really wonderful artists like Laura Marling or Marika Hackman, Ethel Cain, Phoebe Bridges, just to name a few. These are just examples, don't at me. But for me, Joni Mitchell is still the high reference point in regards to contemporary womanhood, which I know is a really grandiose, potentially pretentious thing to say, but what Joni Mitchell is talking about in an album like this, it's just describing all of the relationships, the situationships, she's exposing her vulnerabilities and her desires in a way that for me is, still just, well, incredibly relevant, and I'm hearing so much in the contemporary female singer songwriters. But for me, the reason why I'm selecting this album, beyond all of that, is it's very musicy, which the non-stupid way of putting that is that the musicianship in this album is just absolutely incredible. As a pianist and as a singer and as a guitarist, she's fantastic. But the session musicians that she has on this album are just so wonderful, especially the drum work. If you like middle aged white men wanging on about drumming, then this really is going to be the podcast series for you. But honestly, when you listen to this album on vinyl, the musicianship is just incredible. All of the instruments have the appropriate amount of space to breathe and the separation at the right pace and at the right time, and they just sound so incredibly warm that it really, really makes you appreciate it when you hear it on vinyl. As I say, not only are these songs just brilliant as a collection, but some of them individually are fantastic. There's a suite of 3 songs that spans the end of side A and the start of side B. They're the same situation, Car on a Hill and Down to You. And if you listen to the demo of the album, the demo tapes, it was actually written as one collective song on the piano, for which later Joni's clearly separated them as 3 songs. But it really shows you that how they were written, and they're so complementary and so sympathetic to each other. I especially love the song Car on the Hill, which is all about the lady who's waiting for her man to show up late at night, and she's just sitting around bored, and you can totally envisage that character in a house on the hill in Laurel Canyon. I don't know if you saw the Tarantino movie Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, but it would have been around that time and those houses. And she's hearing the cars coming around the corner and the screeching of the brakes, thinking that is this the guy I'm waiting for? But then the car rolls on. And yeah, it's just wonderful. And as I say, it's so musical. Even at the end of this song, you hear this kind of really gentle kind of arpeggiaty on the bass that sounds like a person almost walking up a gravel driveway. And yeah, it's just brilliant. But possibly my favourite moment is this just beautiful orchestral middle 8 in the song Down to You. This song won the Grammy the following year for Best Arrangement, and the song itself is just brilliant. Have a listen to it. Whether you know it before or whether you've heard it 100 times, just listen to it again. There's this incredible bit where the composition and the arrangements just go off beautifully, and they soar and they swoop. And there's this wonderful bit where Joni Mitchell herself is playing the clavinet, and it's a kind of call and response, like 2 birds in the trees, which kind of mimic the estranged lovers that appear throughout the song. And yeah, it is just wonderful. Another reason why I love this album so much is that kind of like a master painter that would complete a masterpiece, they sometimes just leave a deliberate imperfection in there just to kind of acknowledge that, yeah, they didn't want to make it too perfect. And that actually the last song on the album, Twisted, it's a bit like that. It's a very silly throwaway song that, yeah, there's no way that couldn't have been done by accident. As I say, as an album, well, the songs individually are stunning, but as an album, it's just so wonderful. And if you get it on vinyl, you take the time to listen to it, let it reveal itself to you. You read the lyrics, and live inside of it. It is just brilliant. The next album I'd really like to share as one to start out with is a more recent record. It's Currents by Tame Impala. The reason why I would put this on a list of albums to get if you're starting out is just that it's full of bangers. Basically, it is one of those albums where if you're hosting a party, or if you're going to a party or going to a barbecue, you can just leave the record on and it is just gonna really please the crowd. It is just, even though it was out in 2015, I think, so it's 10 years old now, it still sounds incredibly fresh. It's still so much fun. It just has that incredible groove, that incredible pace to it. Lots of really brilliant drops, melodic hooks. It's just so good. Yeah, this album, it is just brilliant. And again, one of those ones where you really get that great sound quality, that wonderful warm round bass. The drums sound full and kind of full of energy and vibrancy. It just sounds so good on vinyl. And there are other albums that I could have put here as a party pleaser, a bangers album. Probably Is This It by The Strokes is another one that falls into that category. So, yeah, Currents by Tame Impala, it's very essential. The third album I've got here is Desire by Bob Dylan, one of my favourite albums by one of my favourite artists. Bob Dylan's obviously still riding high on that Timothy Chalamet biopic Revival. I thought it was a really good movie. I mean, as in, it was a good piece of entertainment. I don't think we'll ever really get to the inner layers of the onion that is Bob Dylan. And so I think the fact that he endorsed it kind of does a lot for his myth making. However, if you really want to get into him as an artist, this would be a wonderful place to start. And the reason why I've put it on this list of albums that I would recommend if you were starting a collection is that it's the storytelling of each songs, and it's the album as a collection of those stories that is just so brilliant. And listening to them on vinyl, again, sorry for repeating myself, but you're taking the time and you're giving the energy to listen to the characters that he's portraying, to the scenes that he's setting. He he paints with words like such vivid colors, such great places. Um, they're like a wonderful series of like vignettes in each line, just really great stories, and the bits that he tells you, your imagination fills in around the rest in such a wonderful way that, yeah, I can't recommend this album enough. Also, what really shines through on this album is just what a wonderfully happy and creative period he was in at the time. He found wonderful musicians that he just had a great musical chemistry with. The violinist or fiddle player, I can't really quite, viola player, Scarlett Riviera, he saw busking on the streets, really liked how she sounded, how she looked, and thought, yeah, I really need this person in my band. She's a really key, integral part of the album. Just going through the tracks, we've got Hurricane, which is the famous protest song. I've got a really huge Bob Dylan fan friend who really dislikes that song because lots of people think that this is the only song off the album, and they really don't like the song. I think the song itself probably does have a few inaccuracies that were kind of portrayed with artistic license, but you've got to, as they say, print the legend. Mozambique is one of my very favourite Dylan songs. The way that it just bounces, it barely touches the ground, and it's so fun. And yeah, it just puts me in a wonderful place. One More Cup of Coffee, brilliant song. And the album finishes off with the song Sarah, which is probably one of his most autobiographical songs, sung for and to his then wife Sarah Lords, who he was separated from. But actually, off the back of him singing it to her, they reconciled, and they got back together for a bit. It is just the most brilliant song. Musically, it's quite simple, it's quite sparse, but lyrically, it is just pure poetry. the way that he takes us from one scene of their relationship to another, the emotions involved. His description of her is just out of this world. It really is incredible. And as I say, it's these pictures that he paints in the songs that are just so lovely to listen to, and they sound so good on vinyl. So yeah, I think as a collection of songs. No, sorry, that does sound stupid. As a collection of short stories in song form, this album is absolutely fantastic. You don't need to spend lots of money on a new copy for this. There's so many copies of it available in the bargain bins of record stores. If it's been played lots of times, if it's been loved, if it's had those adventures already, and somebody else has taken a lot of deep meaning from it, as long as it's still sounds playable, then yeah, take it. It's yours. Have it. Enjoy it. You'll love it forever. If you don't like it, get in touch. I'll give you your money back myself. This is just such a wonderful and special album. The next album I'd like to talk to you about is Pastel Blue by Nina Simone. Nina Simone is one of those artists that obviously her reputation precedes her, and there's so much learning and there's so much reading that you can do about her. She's such a brilliant, powerful artist. There's that great documentary, What's Eating Miss Simone, that I believe was on Netflix, but also there's a radio version that you may be able to hear depending on where you listen to your radio. But I always found that as an artist, she would be famous for her big hits, and that you could just listen to a best of and think, oh, excellent, I've covered all the bases, because those are the famous songs. But an album like Pastel Blues really gives you that insight into an artist and why they became great artists and why the legend followed. This album was released in 1965, which is obviously such a crucial period of black history in America. If you think that you had the assassination of JFK in 1963 and the assassination of Dr. King Jr. in 1968, and this album would have been such a strong, powerful political message, it would have been impossible not to have been inspired by it. I'll come on to some of the songs later, but when I think about this album, I think about the voice and the delivery and the musical arrangements and the accompaniments. They're quite minimal, but they're so powerful that if I was listening to it at the time, you would have just been like, wow, this is just mind blowing. And to be honest, I still think it sounds incredibly powerful today. There's a version of Strange Fruit on here, which Billie Holiday made famous as a political song. That caused so much controversy at the time. There's another biopic about Billie Holiday that goes into that in more detail. Other wonderful songs on here, Be My Husband, which he sings a cappella. It's just brilliant. Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. That says so much about the political situation at the time. And yeah, it's so eloquent and so powerful. Just brilliant. Trouble in Mind, again, another really, really great song. But I think not only is this just a really powerful collection of tunes, one of the best reasons why I think you should own this song on vinyl is the song Cinnamon, which, again, when I go back to that thing of like, oh, everybody knows it because it's been on the best ofs, it's been on TV a lot, Six Music Player, and you think, oh yeah, I know that song, dun 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 dun. But when you listen to it on vinyl, it reveals another layer of complexity. I didn't realize until I owned this album that it was actually Nina Simone playing piano herself. I didn't realize the amazing musical education she had at Juilliard and just how incredibly classically trained she was. And that if you hear fantastic piano on a Nina Simone album song, it's going to be her. It is not only is it one of the best pieces of piano, but the accompanying percussion is just amazing. And again, hearing on vinyl, you get that space, and you get that wonderful silence between the claps and between the beats, and you feel every key strike just with the power and the poise that it was created to be delivered with. It's just absolutely wonderful. And as I say, we all know the song, but when you hear it on vinyl and you're really listening and you feel, as if it's being performed live for you, then yeah, that's the really good stuff. That's what a record collector does it all for. That's what they really enjoy. And so, Pastel Blue, Nina Simone, get it, get it, get it, get it. You won't be able to get an original. They're too rare. They're too valuable. But a reproduction pressing, yeah, that's not going to set you back, a huge amount. And you'll listen to it again and again and again, and it will always sound brilliant if you look after your records. So, for me, that's a really good album to get, because it reminds you of the potential power of music and the potential for change that it can carry.
Shut up and listen to the songs.
So, moving on, the next album I'd like to talk about and recommend if you're starting a collection, musically is quite different from Nina Simone's Pastel Blue, but I also feel it contains that spirit of rebellion, resistance, protest that is just so essential for music. It's a lifeblood of the creative force of our musical artists. The album I'd like to endorse is Anoni's Hopelessness, her 2016 LP, which focuses primarily on the climate emergency, but also such modern themes as drone warfare, surveillance culture, anti capitalism. So many really pressing modern issues that if you were just to say, oh, all of these things are bad, oh, isn't everything bad, then nobody would listen or nobody would care. But the way she's managed to take these subjects and articulate them in a really easy and understandable yet emotive and compassionate way is just, it's really wonderful as an artist. I can't recommend it enough. The emotional intelligence, her vocal performance, and the obvious urgency of the message she's trying to bring across. It was really fascinating listening to or reading the interviews she gave around the time of the release. She was working a lot with environmental activists, and that they were trying to give the message that when we think about the predicament of the modern world and the hopelessness of that, that it's a bit like the stages of grief, and that you need to work through the hopelessness, and that you need to see that you can have a positive impact, and there can be change, and that there can be a better future if we can kind of A, imagine it, and B, work towards it. I thought it was just such an inspiring message. And you look at some of the thanks on the credits of the album. You've got people like the conceptual artist Marina Abramovich. You've got Bjork. And so it's a really rich and interesting creative space she was in when making this record. But actually, for me, for all those wonderful things about this record, why I've included it on this list is because it sounds completely different to anything that I'd ever heard before. It absolutely stopped me in my tracks. And I think that is because the production, which is by Noni Hudson Mohawk and One Thrick Point Never, I'm not sure I've pronounced that correctly. I have a really hard time trying to articulate what this album musically sounds like, which I think is just a brilliant compliment because it's so unique. It's electronic, and yet it doesn't sound like any of the other kinds of electronic music I've heard before. And that if I was trying to articulate it, I would say it's the kind of music that deserves to be listened to in an art gallery, because that's the kind of space where you can really hear and think about all the different elements and all the different sonic textures that are going on. Potential alert. But yeah, it is an absolutely amazing album, both for the music and for the message. It's entirely inspiring, and yeah, I love it so much. The next album that I'd really like to talk about is probably, well, for me, it's one of the most obvious on this list. It's Miles Davis' Kind of Blue. And yeah, I know what you're thinking. Like, oh, gee, Ben, any more predictable? How about, the Beatles, track one, side one? How about Beethoven's Fifth Symphony? But yeah, Miles Davis, Kind of Blue, is not only a cornerstone of the jazz genre and voted as one of the most influential records of the last century. There are hundreds of reasons why I could put this album in there in this list, and I'll be honest. One of them is because I think if you're getting into vinyl and you're looking to develop your music taste, you're looking to expand your horizons, this is a really wonderful place to start, because sometimes my ears prick up when people say, this is an accessible jazz record. And I've bought quite a few supposedly accessible jazz records, and they have been hard. But I think if you're looking to kind of put different vegetables on your plate musically, not only is this a brilliant way to do it, but it will give you a great routing for what you want going forward in regards to like your musical tastes. However, again, that is not the reason that I'm putting it on this list. Why I really love this record and why I think everybody should have a copy of it is that in the way that really good music gives you a message and you take it on, great music actually listens to you. And what I mean by that is that when you're listening to the music, it reverberates with how you're feeling at the time. It resonates with your soul, and that if you're downbeat and if you're feeling really low energy, then it can just relax you and it can calm you and soothe you. And yet, if you want to be excited, if you want to have something to respond to your energy, then it will also reach inside of you and it'll give you that energy to move. And yeah, it's absolutely magic. And one of the other albums coming up, I feel, has also got this absolutely magical property in that the music will listen to you. And yeah, it's just so brilliant. Miles Davis, A Kind of Blue. I can't endorse it enough. It really is great. The next album that I really want to talk about is also kind of on that theme of energy. In that when I was thinking about this list, I want to be really high minded. I want this wonderful, eloquent lyricism, or I want, these really avant garde production, musical arrangements. But thinking about the emotions, I wanted the emotion of anger to be represented. I feel that, we try and diminish it and kind of, we don't acknowledge that it's as a legitimate emotion as happiness, sadness, fear, contentment. It's really essential to us, and actually denying it and denying ways that we can express that can also be really detrimental to us. So the album that I really wanted to put on this list is the debut album by the Smashing Pumpkins, Gish. It was released in the early 90s, around the time of a lot of quite angry male guitar music. And the reason why I would really recommend this album and the reason why I put it on this list is that sometimes you listen to music made by somebody who's really upset, angry, whatever adjective you want to use, and you think, that's going to suffer musically because of that. But this is an album that musically, it's just fantastic. Yes, there is that loud, raw guitar sound. You've got those the energy in the vocals that is expressing that anger, but there's also like this really wonderful, submersive, psychedelic edge to it. The drumming, again, hashtag no apologies. The drumming is absolutely incredible. It sounds amazing on vinyl, and you've also got like this, as I say, bluesy psychedelic guitar points that just kind of everything just goes slightly sideways, and that it kind of gives you that just that moment to reflect, and to kind of to think and pause to try and help you make sense of what you're feeling. The world is such a discombobulated place that kind of we all need an outlet for how we feel sometimes, and that from an energy level perspective, I think this album is just completely brilliant. So the next choice that I'd like to put on this list is a personal favorite. When I said at the start that this isn't a list of albums that I would choose to make myself look cool, this is kind of the exception that proves that rule, in that I consider it to be the coolest album that I own, and that if I ever had somebody I really wanted to impress, this probably would be the album that I go to or I have gone to. It is Massive Attack, Blue Lines. I think no one album does more to define a genre than what this album does for trip hop. It is kind of it is a bit like what Kind of Blue is for jazz, and also like Kind of Blue that I mentioned, it has that incredible magic that the music listens to you and how you're feeling. And if you want to relax at 3 o'clock in the morning after a party, you can put it on and it'll do that for you. Or you can put it on at 11 o'clock in the morning and it will give you that energy that you need. It's just absolutely brilliant. I'm quoting here from a What Hi-Fi article about the album. It showcases Massive Attack's early genre-defining sound, mixing hip-hop, breaks, dub bass lines, and atmospheric synths. And also it mentions some of the samples that they pick out, things like Funkadelic, Herbie Hancock. Some of the jazz samples are absolutely brilliant. And it perfectly encapsulates the kind of early 90s eclectic eclecticism that you had going on in a place like Bristol. I don't know how well you know Bristol, but yeah, it is a wonderfully diverse and alternative and creative place. And when you think about the bands that came out of there around that time, so you had Portishead, or you had Goldie, you had Ronnie Size. A personal favourite of mine was the producer Conrad Lambert, who went under the name Mertz towards the end of the 90s. I'd recommend his debut album. You've just got these wonderful influences coming together. And apart from being a really cool album, and as I say, kind of music that listens to you, this is the sort of album where it's good enough to inspire you to leave home, to move to a different part of the country, where there's a scene, where there's a happening, where there's something going on that you want to be part of. When I think of this album and the brilliant tunes, I mean, what have we got here? We've got Safe from Harm, we've got One Love, we've got Five Man Army, Unfinished Sympathy. They're all incredible. They're all incredible tracks by themselves, but it's the collection of those songs and how well they complement each other, and that when you're listening to them on vinyl, you're obviously hearing the music, but you're hearing the message as well. You're taking that time, and yeah, it's just a really, really brilliant experience. So the ninth album on this list is probably not a great surprise for many people. It's Abbey Road by the Beatles. I know, so shocking. That can I just shock you? Yeah, I love the Beatles. I'm going to cover them in more depth. Abbey Road, obviously, we all know it really well. It is the definition of a classic album. So why am I including on this list? What could we kind of get to learn or get to know about it? So a few things about it. For me, even though it's not per se my favorite Beatles record, I think musically it probably is their best record, and that, yeah, if you want to kind of really appreciate the Beatles as musicians, as composers, as arrangers, as music visionaries, this is a wonderful album to reach for. They're still trying amazing things. When you listen to the tune Maxwell's Silver Hammer, you've got one of the first recorded examples of synthesizers. I mean, as a song, it was the most divisive song amongst the Beatles themselves, and it's very divisive amongst Beatles fans. I personally love Maxwell Silverhammer. I think it's just absolutely batshit beautiful and crazy and far out there. And yeah, you've got lots of other just wonderful songs. Something like Octopus's Garden, those wonderful visceral childhood memories of when you hear it the first time. The images that it conjures for you is just really great. There are so many wonderful songs on this album. I'm not going to go through them all here. And obvious to say that, yeah, they sound really great on vinyl because it was all mastered for vinyl. This was the only album of the Beatles that was mastered in stereo. I think it is possible to get a mono version, but basically, if you ever see a mono version of Abbey Road, it's the stereo. It's the stereo mix, but kind of folded down. So it's not a true mono version. So yes, it does sound absolutely brilliant on vinyl, hence why I'm including it. But the real reason why I want to put this on my list of albums is that it encapsulates the deliberate and defined end of one of the most socially important moments in modern history. In that, I think, while some people are indifferent to the Beatles, some people think they're the greatest band of all time. Hello. One thing which is impossible to deny is the social impact they had on a post-war world, a world that had kind of been living in monochrome with the emotional weight of their parents' generation, and they came along and they just kicked the door in and said, "No, we're gonna have fun, we're gonna have sex, we're gonna get drunk, and it's gonna be beautiful and colourful and great." And those 5 years where they were in the spotlight and they had the world's attention, they changed the world like nobody has ever done before or since. And when they get to the end of this album and they're singing literally the end, it's a very deliberate and self-acknowledging closing of not only their own history but the whole history that's happened, the whole world that they've affected. And that as a historical document, this album is so crucial in the way that you could be a social professor and kind of go on about, well, societies became a lot more introverted and people became more selfish and all of those other things that I really do not have any authority to speak upon. There's been obviously other really great music and other wonderful things, but I think as a collective who changed the world, yeah, they were the first and last word on what music could achieve and could inspire people to do and see the world differently. And so yeah, this album, obviously it's brilliant. You know that, I know that, but as a document, as something you want to have and to go back to, yeah, this is the one. So that is the ninth choice. And so the last choice on this list of albums is no choice at all. It's whatever you want. It's whatever you see and inspires you and kind of piques your curiosity and your interest. And yeah, if you are getting into records, take a punt. Go for something that you think, I heard that single on the radio. It was good. I find that artwork really interesting. They look really distinctive. Go for it. There should be no rules about where your curiosity takes you in regards to your record purchasing. The only really slight caveat I would put onto that that point is go for something new, go for something contemporary, go for something that could be a future classic. Don't go for a reissue of something that people have already produced plenty enough copies of. I will be covering reissues and my love and my loathing for them in future editions. But yeah, if you see something and a mate's recommended it to you, as I say, you heard it, the single on the radio, go for it. It's really unlikely that if you take something on a punt and you give it a fair chance that you'll regret it. And so yeah, 10 records. If you've stayed the duration to listen to this, thank you. That's really kind of your time and your mental energies. I hope I've achieved in what I wanted from this list, as in not only to say here's a load of records I like, but to kind of getting you thinking about records in a different way. When we go back to it, we've got great musicality, we've got wonderful lyricism, we've got incredible production, we've got really strong political messages, we've got music that kind of listens to your energy and responds and reciprocates to how you're feeling. We've got something to listen to when you're angry and you're pissed off, something to inspire you to move to a different part of the country and start a movement, to get in a scene. We've got an important historic document, and we've got an album full of bangers to entertain your mates when they come around for a party. So I hope it's been as fun for you listening as it has been for me recording it. I'm going to be doing some more episodes, obviously. So yeah, stick around, and thanks again. Do take care. Bye.
Shut up and listen to the songs.